Hello and welcome, friends, in this new episode of Crit Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni. For last few episodes, we are discussing recent trends that came in theory and especially in literary theory after 1980s. So, cultural studies was one of them. In today's session, we are going to discuss new historicism, which came around 1970s and 80s, and which is considered to be still a dominating, is still a very influential kind of approach as far as theory is concerned. So I welcome Dr. Anand Kulkarni. I welcome Ganesham in this show, in this episode. And I put my first question before you, sir, that how this entire approach called as new criticism, new historicism, should be defined and should be understood.
Good morning, Dr. Pranav Ratnaparki and Professor Ganesham Borate, and good morning to viewers as well. Today we shall discuss in brief new historicism. The first question that Pranav sir raised is about the origin of new historicism. You were rightly pointing out earlier that there is a strong connection between new criticism and new historicism. Even though it's a kind of slippage, but still there is a connection and we cannot forego it. New historicism should be understood in contradistinction with or against the background of historicism. There is something called new, which works as a prefix for historicism. But then it is because new, it is against the conventional or traditional historicism. I think it is better if we understand new historicism against historicism to begin with. Historicism was something which was practiced conventionally or traditionally with the help of the traditionally available modes of appreciation and analysis of literature from the historical point of view. One of the most important practitioners of old historicism or orthodox historicism was E.M.W. Tilliard, who came out with a historical approach to literature. Before that, we know there was a concept called milieu, in which environment and environmental contexts were very important as far as the study of literature was concerned. And the French, earlier French theorists and critics were phenomenal as far as the bringing of context to the study of literature was concerned. Taine, for example, who proposed this concept called milieu. We will not go too far back in understanding all this. This much is enough, I think.
Yeah.
I refer to Tilliard because Tilliard was practicing in the earlier half of the 20th century and was one of the most influential practitioners of historicism. With him, we have C.S. Lewis as well,
Yes,
who also applied some of the moral and historical ethical concepts to the study of literature. Now, what was the basic difference between these two? I would say that they were more concerned with world. The old historicist critics were more concerned with world, W-O-R-L-D, this is.
Yeah.
Whereas new historicists are more concerned with words, that is W-O-R-D-S.
Yeah.
That is perhaps, to be very simple, this is the major difference between the two. And that stands for the difference between them, of course, that clearly explains what they intended to do with literature. And this, of course, is a kind of discourse to or discourses to the understanding of literature. This is all about literature that we have to keep in mind. With this much short understanding of the background against which new historicism can be adequately understood, I think we should move towards the rise of new historicism. I will not say that new historicism rose in a way. We can say that the prominence of new historicism could be felt in the 1970s and 80s, more prominently in 1980s. But not that new historicism is something very new, because new historicism draws on so many varied and different discourses which were already prevalent, and that they draw their inspiration. All new historicists draw their inspiration from the existing modes of understanding The only difference is that they bring them together and make a collage out of them and try to understand literature and history and even other contexts as well. So it is better if we do not term it to be new in the sense in which it has been understood, but we can surely say that it is new because, as I earlier said, that it is anti-conventional, anti-establishment, anti-essentialist. It is in that sense that it is new that
Right.
we have to understand. Second, the most important or the most prominent practitioner of new historicism is, of course, Stephen Greenblatt and Louis Montrose, two of them being probably the most prominent practitioners. But then they draw on some other very important theorists and critics. For example, Michel Foucault is there. For example, Roland Barthes is there. For example, Jacques Derrida is there. For example, lesser known Pierre Bourdieu is there. Even one of the most prominent American anthropologists, who is less known but known clearly well to the students and researchers of new historicism, Clifford Geertz, was also a very important figure who provided the necessary impetus, necessary theoretical framework for the study of the new historicist approach. So these are some of the prominent practitioners, I would say. The other version of new historicism is not something which is limited to itself or something which is a restricted discourse. It is an inquiry, or rather a set of inquiries into some of the important disciplines, some of the important areas, fields, we could say. As is true with all postmodern critical discourses, is also true with new historicism, because you cannot have a specified set of ideas, a typical framework which can be very easily adopted. It is varied, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, depending on so many power bases and drawing on so many discourses that exist before them. So their nature is very complex. And if you asked me to define new historicism, I would say that it is more like, this is of course an analogy, but it is better if we take it at this point of time, and that will clarify the idea that it is very difficult to clear up the field of new historicism and get an idea about it. For example, you go to a shop of electronics and you want to buy a TV set, and then you shall see that there are so many TV sets which are displayed before you, and one program is displayed on many different TV sets, and it is differently presented, and you do not know which of them is reliable and acceptable. It is something like that. So you have so many varieties of discourses, so many varieties of studies, so many varieties of inquiries, that it is difficult for you to typify, speculate, specify one and call it to be new historicism. So that is that. It is this multiplicity, plurality, multitudinousness of new historicism that we have to understand. And this is not true just with new historicism. This is true with all postmodern, post-structural discourses, including cultural studies.
Yeah. So, sir,
You rightly earlier pointed out.
Sir, can we just say that in the title, the mentioning of history is there, but it is not limited to history only.
Yeah, definitely. I'll come to that. You are right. And you also previously rightly pointed out that it is a part of cultural studies. You cannot separate it from that. Now, let us come to the term new historicism. You know, Montrose defined it very well, I think, and that is a key to the understanding of new historicism. It is this, that new historicism is historicity of text and textuality of history. If you ask me to put in very simple terms, in short terms, these are not simple terms, but surely short. Historicity of text is that you historicize, and textuality of history is that you textualize. Now, you shall see that there is a shift in emphasis. There is a variation in emphasis on both these two. When you turn towards historicity of text, you are more bothered about the history of text. Whereas when you turn towards textuality of history, you are more bothered about texts and less bothered about history. Now, when you turn towards textuality of history, it becomes post-structural.
Yeah.
When you turn towards historicity of text, you turn towards new historicism. That is the difference between new historicism and post-structuralism. But then new historicism also draws on post-structuralism, postmodernism, cultural studies, and many other discourses which were prevalent in the time in which Stephen Greenblatt and Montrose were writing. For example, you shall see, this of course is about variant of new historicism. You have something called cultural materialism. New historicism is basically an American-based variety of historicizing literature. Cultural materialism is a British variety. And we all know that Raymond Williams was the pioneering figure as far as cultural materialism is concerned. So you can very comfortably claim Raymond Williams to be one of the important theorists of new historicism, of course, if not new historicism. But all new historicist practitioners have drawn some ideas from Raymond Williams as well. Now, there is, of course, a difference between new historicism and cultural materialism. And the difference is that new historicists focus more on the economic and social and historical issues, whereas cultural materialist critics focus more on the Marxist issues, the materialist issues, economic and class-oriented and materialist issues. They are less social and historical, more materialistic and economic oriented. These cultural materialist critics, Otherwise, you shall see that there have been very parallel developments as far as cultural materialism and new historicism is concerned. Now, to be brief, I would say Michel Foucault, Clifford Gris, Frederick Jameson, Raymond Williams, and Jacques Derrida are the big players who have provided the necessary framework for new historicism. And Greenblatt and Montrose both have drawn heavily on these great theorists and thinkers. Of course, Pierre Bourdieu is there, and another one, Richard Rorty, is also there. They have done their studies in different fields and with different angles, but they have provided the necessary framework to the new historicist critics and theorists. This, I think, is what will help us understand the origins of new historicism.
Yes. Right.
Some idea about it.
Yeah. Sham, you have some question.
Yes. So can we say that new historicism, which emerged after 1980s, can be called as a reaction or a response to the postmodern and the post-structural ways of looking at text and history?
To an extent, we can call it to be. I would rather say it is a response in place of reaction, because there have been very strong affiliations between new historicism and postmodernism and post-structuralism, which I earlier said. I will give you two examples, and that would perhaps clear up the idea. You have two of the most famous theorists of postmodernism. One is Frederick Jameson, an American Marxist critic, and another is Loeta, who has been very famous for his postmodernism. We know that he wrote a very famous, phenomenal book by the title The Postmodern Condition, and which was responsible for the ushering in of postmodernism in the study of academia, in the circle of academia. Now, how do these two, Loeta and Jameson, look at history and text and literature? You shall see that Loeta looks upon the study of literature and the study of culture from the point of view of differentiation. He looks for differences. All post-structural and postmodern critics always look for differences. That is an important way to know how they look upon literature and culture and history. In fact, culture, let us use the umbrella term, a carpet word, culture. Now go for Jameson and he will tell you that he looks for integration. He doesn't look for differences. He would like to understand culture from the integrated point of view, because he would not like to see art and society, content and form differentiated from each other. For him, content and form should be integrated. For Loeta, content and form, art and society should be differentiated. So one is postmodern, both of them are postmodern in the established sense of the term, but then you shall see that one is a hardcore Marxist, another is not a hardcore Marxist. But this is how they look upon culture and art in general and literature in specific. And that is how I think will make us understand the differences. Now, what is Greenblatt's take on this? Greenblatt opposes both. He opposes the postmodern critics in the sense that postmodern critics have tried to lay more emphasis on differences or differentiation. And he also resists the Marxist also to some extent for having laid more focus on integration and not being able to differentiate between art and society, between form and content, between individual and society, between culture and society, between culture and individual. So you have these kinds of things, and Greenblatt has dealt with these things at a very minute and micro level, bringing to us the idea that it is not out of the fractions, these kinds of fractions, that we can study culture, but it is through drawing on these fields and drawing on these insights that he moves on. Now you will ask how Greenblatt and new historicists look at postmodern and postcultural. The answer is they draw certain ideas from them, but they do not entirely believe into their frames of analysis. They have their own ways of looking at it. Now, what is the way? That they try to historicize. Fredric Jameson made an appeal that we should historicize everything in the world. Every study of every field should be historicized. But this was an excessive kind of obsession on the part of the later Marxists, which of course Greenblatt does not fall prey to, and he tries to come out of that. I think this explanation would give you the idea that there is not a direct kind of reaction or response, but then they have drawn on it. For example, Foucault. Foucault has proved to be one of the most important inspiration for new historicists. I think I was able in some way partly to answer to your query.
Sir, I would come back to that idea of historicizing. So how our students and researchers should understand the process of historization? What exactly we mean by historizing something?
Yeah, that takes us to the core of historicism, new historicism, Now we have to understand, I missed out one reference, which I earlier had decided to refer to, and it was White-Haddon. Haddon White he has been an American scholar, American theorist and philosopher. He came out with the idea called meta-history. It's all about how you write history. It is about how you write history and how you study history. Now, this is about how we differently understand history. Conventionally, history is linear. Conventionally, history is a conglomeration of facts and events. It's a storehouse of facts and events, and history is nothing else but documentation. So there is a linear progression of history. That is, you start with a particular point of reference and then you move on, and that there is a straight line that you can draw. And you can say that these were the events, these were the important figures. You can just document them, you can just record them. And it turns out to be only a kind of archive, a kind of history that you come out with. So history was linear, more straightforward, could be easily documented, and that they understood that history opens a window for our understanding of the past. So it's a very clear-cut, crystal understanding of history, that history is an history is a very straightforward line and you can have a very clear understanding of it. Conventionally, history was understood like this. And also the writing of history was supposed to be very objective.
Yeah.
That you maintain objectivity in the writing of history and you move on doing with that. These ideas that history is very clear, transparent, a record, a documentation, and it's linear, and that it can be objectively written. These two ideas were challenged by Michel Foucault. Foucault came out. Foucault probably was perhaps the most important French theorist who challenged this conventional idea of history. He came out with the idea that history is not transparent, it is not linear, that history is full of inconsistencies and discrepancies, that there are some fissures which underlie the apparent and surface level description, that we are not able to understand history in the terms which are dictated by the historian. So he not only challenged history as a discipline, he challenged historiography also, that is writing of history. So history as an institutionalized practice was challenged, and writing of history was also challenged. So writing of history is not that you are able to write history with a sense of objectivity, that you cannot separate yourself from history, the past, and then you write about it. There have been some interrelational issues which transit between your past and present. You cannot separate your past and present.
Right.
In other words, you shall see history. If you write about history, you are the part of history. You are not free from it.
Right.
And it is the present contexts which work over you, and also in some way interpolate, in some way intervene into your understanding of history.
So objectivity is not possible.
Both history and the writing of history. So history is something which you cannot understand in a very clear, linear kind of thing. But at the same time, one who writes history is also not free from the inconsistencies and contradictions, This was a kind of revolutionary understanding of history and historiography, which of course was later on applied to literature. For example, if you write a work of literature, if you write about the history of literature, not that you are free from it. You are the part of it, and your present contexts certainly influence your understanding of the history of literature, and it is through that understanding, you call them to be ideological or otherwise, but then it is through those kinds of contexts, your present contexts, that you try to record the history of literature, and that of course influences your understanding of literature. So you cannot have an objective, clinical, free from sentimental and decontextualized concept of history. That is impossible. That was the revolutionary idea that Foucault brought to the understanding of European and American, later on American theorists and critics. And this was, I think, what you call the historicization of text.
So interpretation became more important. The activity of interpretation became more important.
Hermeneutics was also brought into, because that was all about interpretation. Interpretation was the field reserved for literary critics, and they were of course baffled by these kinds of paradigm shifts, these kinds of reversals, because once you put text aside, earlier you were referring to new criticism, new critics focused on text. Now, when we come to textualization of history or textuality of history, text becomes more important. Now, text that is ahistorical, that is text that is bereft of history, text that is deprived of its contexts, was what the main pursuit of the new critics.
Right.
New critics were more bothered about text that was autotelic, text that was autonomous, text that was dehistoricized, text that did not bother about the context.
Right.
Or in simple terms, text free from contexts. With textuality of history, we bring in history. And Stephen Greenblatt raised some of the vital and important objections to new critics and to the new critical conception of text, because you cannot have a text without history. You cannot have text without contexts. How can you interpret then? Your idea of interpretation comes over here. How can you interpret text without knowing its contexts? So that is that. This was not something that he was bringing new to the understanding of literature, the text. It was already present. The only thing that was emphasized in New Historicism by Greenblatt and other practitioners was this, that they tried to bring in post-structural ideas and postmodernist ideas as well. For example, look at Derrida's theory of textuality, and you will immediately understand how Stephen Greenblatt was influenced by Derridian conception of text. That text does not give you a simple, purified, stable, universal meaning. So text is not stable. It is not closed. It is not fixed, not stable. Doesn't give you a specific idea. This is there. This element of plurality was drawn in. So text was understood, but text was understood as a fluid kind of thing, something that moves on, something that flows. So when you go for textuality of history, you look upon history as a text. Stephen Greenblatt understood. Stephen Greenblatt understood history as a fiction. And this was something very different,
Very different. Okay.
History was supposed to be the documentation of facts. History was equivalent to facts earlier. That is what history is all about, facts.
Right.
And literature is also all about fiction. But now you remove the disciplinary walls, disciplinary restrictions between literature and history, and you understand that they are overlapping. That there are certain overlapping areas that you cannot very sufficiently differentiate between them. That literature becomes history and history becomes literature. Now, once this happens, you have to understand that if literary texts are not fixed and stable, history is also not. So, new historicist critics always look upon literature and history and all other things as cultural products. All of them are cultural products. By cultural products, we mean that all contexts are to be taken into account. Stephen Greenblatt used another term which is very apt, I think, to describe the terrain called New Historicism, and it is poetics of culture. It is poetics of culture. That is a very apt description of this. And Stephen Greenblatt was not very happy with New Historicism, the term New Historicism. He tried to resign from it, but unfortunately it had become so widely popular and it was widely circulated that he could not refrain from the popularity of it and its consequent use, Montrose wrote another very important article, I think, by the title Poetics of Culture and Poetics of Politics and Culture. So politics has been brought into that. So you have this, you can have poetics of culture. That I think is something which is very self-explanatory. It illuminates well, it illustrates well what you wanted to look upon literature. He brings all post-structural ideas towards the study of history, which I think Hayden White has also done. You have a concept called meta-history. We don't have time to go into that. But then it means that he was the one who tried to bring in the idea of writing. History is basically writing. It is all about writing. Now, what kind of writing is it? You go to post-structural theories and you will understand that writing has turned out to be a very complicated idea. So language and writing become very important. They become very phenomenal. And it is through these complex lenses, overlapping lenses, that you have to understand the progression of history. So Hayden White also produces another version of New Historicism. You may not, of course, very comfortably call it to be New Historicist, but then he was also providing this kind of thing.
Right.
So it is through these, I think, we can better understand new historicism.
Yes, sir. I think before we close this episode, we should see that now with the recent trends in literary theory like new historicism or like cultural studies, one has to understand that things are getting more and more problematized. With post-structural people, language was problematized. With postmodern people, the entire idea of truth or objectivity got problematized. Narratives got problematized. With people, the new historicist people, the history also got more problematized. So I think, friends, students and researchers, we have to understand one thing, that with these trends, let us get rid of this idea that one can understand the things simply or immediately, or there is a complete understanding. So these are the versions we should keep on visiting and revisiting. So probably as a students of literature, suppose there is a one text, and that text again is related to history. Probably we can keep on interpreting and creating the versions of meaning without claiming that this is a fixed meaning or this is the meaning. So I think this is what probably Dr. Kulkarni is trying to put forth in this episode. We all know that these are very complex issues and they cannot be dealt in maybe half an hour or such kind of issues. But this is just an attempt to create a background on which you people can study and which you people can move in the direction. I thank Dr. Kulkarni for sharing his insightful views. So I conclude this episode by thanking him, thanking Ganeshan, and of course thanking the audience, and of course with an appeal that keep watching more episodes of Crit Talks in the coming days. Thank you so much for your response.